There's something deeply unsettling about abandoned amusement parks. Places once filled with laughter, lights, and life now left to rot in silence. The peeling paint on forgotten rides, the creak of rusted metal in the wind, and the eerie stillness that blankets every corner seem to whisper that something is still there, watching, waiting. Tonight, we explore 4 true stories of horror tied to these forsaken parks. Stories of unexplained music echoing from long-dead carousels, ghostly cries from sealed tunnels, and rides that should no longer move, yet do. Welcome to the Forgotten Fun Fair. Story 1. The carousel that played by itself. When Nathan Harlow took the job at the city's Historical Preservation Office, he wasn't expecting much beyond paperwork, grant writing, and the occasional tour of an old building. What he got instead was a night that would haunt him forever, an encounter with something he still can't explain. It began when his boss asked him to survey the long-abandoned Litchfield Amusement Park, yet a local legend tucked deep in the woods outside town. It had been closed since 1987, following a series of safety violations, a fire that gutted most of the funhouse, and rumors, wild, whispering rumors, about a child who disappeared near the carousel. The park had since been sealed off, overgrown, and quietly forgotten. But a redevelopment project was gaining momentum, and Nathan's job was to document the site's structural integrity and note anything salvageable. He arrived just after 5 p.m., the autumn sun filtering through skeletal branches. Rusted ticket booths, collapsing roller coasters, and graffiti-covered food stands surrounded him in silence. The air smelled of damp leaves and mold. He brought a flashlight, a notebook, and his camera, everything he thought he'd need for a solo site survey. But within minutes, Nathan realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. The carousel stood at the center of the park, remarkably intact compared to the decay surrounding it. The chipped horses still rose and dipped along their poles, their painted eyes faded but intact. The overhead canopy was torn, revealing sections of sun-bleached sky, but the platform beneath them was eerily clean, as if the dirt of decades had never touched it. As Nathan approached, the wind picked up. It wasn't strong, just enough to stir the leaves around the base of the carousel. But then something odd happened. He heard music, faint at first, the tinny melody of a calliope, a waltz. Nathan froze. He looked around. There was no power here, no working speakers. Yet the music continued, clearer now, as if the wind had summoned the ghosts of happier days. He pulled out his phone and recorded a video, narrating the situation aloud. "There's no power, but I hear the carousel music. I'm not sure where it's coming from." As if responding, the carousel groaned and shifted. One of the horses, the white one with the cracked golden bridle, twitched. It twitched. The entire platform jerked an inch clockwise with a low creak, and then the music stopped. Nathan backed away. The sudden silence was deafening. He decided he'd seen enough for the evening and turned to leave. But as he walked away, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a video notification, his own footage uploading to the cloud. Curious, he played it back. In the video, the music was present, that eerie carousel tune, but something was off. At the edge of the screen where the carousel horse had twitched stood a figure, a child, pale, motionless, and barely visible behind one of the poles. Nathan hadn't seen anyone there in real time. He rewound. There she was again, closer this time. The footage lasted 23 seconds before the carousel groaned and the music cut out. But in the final frame, just before the screen went dark, Nathan saw something that made his blood run cold. The little girl was facing the camera now, her mouth wide open but no sound, her eyes completely black. He dropped the phone. Nathan's flashlight flickered. The air grew cold. He turned around and the carousel had started moving. Slowly, deliberately. Each horse rising and falling, the platform spinning. The music had returned, louder now, warbling and off-key, like a music box being forced open. And on one of the horses sitting side saddle was the little girl. Her dress was stained, the fabric shredded at the edges. Her hair hung in wet, clumped strands over her face. She didn't look up, didn't move, just sat as the carousel turned. Nathan ran. He didn't look back, didn't stop until he reached the outer fence, scaled it, and bolted to his car, parked half a mile down the old access road. His hands shook as he turned the key, glancing in the rearview mirror again and again as if expecting her to appear in the back seat. Later that night, he tried watching the video again. It was gone. Not just from the cloud, but from his phone, like it had never existed. The next morning, Nathan went to the historical office and turned in his resignation. He didn't give a reason. When pressed, he simply said, "Some things should be left the way they are." But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks later, a group of teenagers snuck into Litchfield Park after reading urban legends online. They recorded their trip on TikTok, laughing, mocking the rusted ruins. One video stood out. It showed the group surrounding the carousel, daring each other to ride the broken horses. The music started playing again. The video was only 15 seconds long. It ends with the phone hitting the ground, the screen facing sideways as feet scramble and someone screams. The police found nothing when they arrived, just an empty phone and a slowly spinning carousel. They closed off Litchfield Park permanently after that, doubled the fencing, put up motion detectors. But even now, hikers report hearing the faint strains of carousel music drifting through the trees, especially at dusk. And once in a while, someone spots a little girl watching from between the horses, never moving, never blinking, just waiting for someone else to ride. Story 2, Screams from the Tunnel of Love. If you ask anyone from the town of Bay Ridge about the old Harborview amusement park, they'll probably just shake their heads and mutter something about bad memories or stupid kids messing around. The place had been shut down for nearly 30 years after a tragic drowning incident inside its once popular Tunnel of Love ride. But no one could agree on the exact details, only that a couple went in and never came out. Some said it was a murder-suicide. Others claimed the ride malfunctioned and the boat capsized. One version said the man came out screaming, drenched and raving that the girl had been taken. But there was one thing they all agreed on. The Tunnel of Love was cursed. Kayla Gomez didn't believe in curses. A 22-year-old urban explorer and self-proclaimed paranormal debunker, Kayla ran a moderately successful YouTube channel where she investigated supposedly haunted places and proved how easily fear could be explained by broken machinery, shadows, or overactive imaginations. When she found out about Harborview Park, she was ecstatic. An abandoned theme park? A ride with a tragic backstory? It was perfect content. She arrived just before sunset with her cameraman and editor, Mark. They slipped past the warning signs, ducked under the loose sections of the chain link fence, and made their way through the overgrown paths. The park was crumbling, nature taking back everything. Vines wrapped around the skeletal remains of roller coasters, rust coated every railing, and graffiti marked every wall. But the Tunnel of Love remained strangely untouched. It sat on the far end of the park, a weather-worn, heart-shaped arch marking its entrance. A murky canal snaked into the darkness under a faux stone tunnel, the faded lettering above reading, "Lovers Only." "Weird how this one's still standing," Mark muttered, panning his flashlight across the chipped plaster. Kayla shrugged. "Probably because nobody bothers. Too boring. No thrill-seekers want to film a ride for couples. Until now." She turned to the camera and did her intro. "Hey guys, it's Kayla here with another episode of Debunked and Done. Tonight, we're inside the abandoned Harborview amusement park, where two teens supposedly vanished forever in the Tunnel of Love. But we're going to see what's really hiding in there." The plan was simple. Get into one of the still floating boats, follow the water path through the tunnel, film whatever was inside, then exit and spend the night editing the footage. The boat creaked as they stepped in, half submerged and covered in leaves. But it held. Mark used a pole to push them forward, and soon they were gliding into the mouth of the tunnel, swallowed by darkness. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. The warm air outside gave way to a clammy chill that clung to their skin. Kayla clicked on her high-lumen flashlight, revealing the interior. The walls were covered in peeling murals of romantic landscapes, sunsets, swans, moonlit rivers, but all were faded and water-stained. Most of the animatronics had been destroyed or stolen, but a few remained. A plaster couple frozen in a kiss, a swan with one eye missing, a broken harp-playing angel. Then came the sounds. First, it was just the drip of water from the ceiling, but soon they heard something else. A soft whisper, a sigh, a sob. "Did you hear that?" Kayla whispered. "Probably wind," Mark replied, but his voice lacked confidence. The boat drifted around a bend. The flashlight beam caught something on the wall. Red paint, smeared in streaks like it had been hastily dragged by a hand. or maybe not paint. Was this here in the original ride? Mark asked. No, Kayla said, her voice thin. This looks recent. Then came the scream, loud, close. A woman's scream, high-pitched and full of terror. It echoed off the tunnel walls, making it impossible to locate the source. Mark dropped the pole into the water. Was that a prank? He gasped. Kayla was frozen. Her light was shaking in her grip, the beam stuttering as it bounced across the walls. Then the boat stopped, dead still. They had reached a room, a circular chamber at the center of the ride. The ceiling was higher here, domed with a rotting cherub mural. Surrounding them were several other boats, old, moldy, and half-submerged. One of them still had people in it, at least at first glance. Two figures sat stiffly side by side in the boat across from them. Mannequins? Kayla thought so, until the woman's head turned. No sound, no movement from the boat, just the slow tilt of her head toward them. And then her mouth began to open, wider than it should have, far too wide. The skin cracked at the corners. Blackness spilled out, not liquid, but void. The man beside her moved too, jerking like a puppet on strings. His hands rose, trembling, as if beckoning. Kayla fumbled for the camera. We need to go. Mark, back us up. I dropped the pole, he said, panic rising. The water beneath them rippled. Something was moving under the surface. Then the boat lurched, violently, throwing them to the side. The camera tumbled into the water. Kayla grabbed onto the edge. She saw something brush past her leg, cold, slimy. From the tunnel ahead came the screams again. Multiple voices now, children, adults, overlapping and rising in agony. She looked back. The woman in the other boat was now standing, no longer stiff. Her limbs moved fluidly, but her face was not right. Hollow eyes, no nose. A grin that stretched ear to ear, showing a mouth full of water and worms. Mark screamed. Kayla reached for him, but a pale hand shot from the water and pulled him under. She didn't see where he went. Just bubbles. Then nothing. Kayla kicked, grabbed the edge of the boat, and used what strength she had to pull herself forward into the tunnel beyond. The darkness tightened. The screams faded. Only the sound of her breath and the occasional splash behind her remained. She emerged from the tunnel an hour later, soaked, bruised, and shaking. No one believed her. The police found nothing but debris. They called it a prank gone wrong, said Mark probably ran off or drowned and washed out to the nearby bay. But the camera footage she recovered, only one clip remained. A 5-second shot from the boat before the scream. In it, Mark is pointing ahead. His voice is calm but confused. Is that someone crying? In the distance, barely visible under the dim lighting, a boat is floating toward them. Empty, except for the long red trail smeared along its edges, dripping into the water like fresh paint. Kayla never uploaded the video. She deleted her channel, moved away, changed her number, but Harborview still stands. And late at night, the townspeople say, if you're quiet, you can hear the gentle lapping of water, and then a scream echoing from the tunnel. Not once, not twice, but over and over, like someone is trapped in there, forever reliving the moment they died. Story 3, the funhouse that watches you back. Trevor had always been a photographer with an eye for eerie decay. Urban exploration wasn't just a hobby for him, it was an obsession. Derelict hospitals, collapsed motels, even the occasional dead shopping mall. He'd been in them all, camera in hand, chasing the melancholy beauty of abandonment. So when he heard rumors about an amusement park upstate, shut down in the 80s after a string of freak accidents, he couldn't resist. The place was called Joyland Hollow. Locals in nearby towns refused to talk about it, but old message boards were full of speculation. A faulty Ferris wheel that flung a kid into the woods, a mirror maze that swallowed a teenage girl, and the laughing clown, an animatronic that supposedly cried blood. Trevor brushed off the folklore as the usual urban legends. People always had stories. He drove up on a foggy Saturday morning. The GPS stopped functioning a few miles out, and the cracked road to the park was swallowed by weeds. When he finally arrived, a rusting iron gate stood open just enough for a person to slip through. Beyond it, time had frozen in a nightmare of broken rides and skeletal roller coasters. The air was thick with mold, old grease, and something else, something metallic. He snapped shots of the carousel, its horses now headless. The bumper cars were half submerged in brackish water, like grave markers of fun. But it was the funhouse that drew him. It towered like a forgotten cathedral. Gaudy paint now flaked to reveal the dark wood beneath. The sign above the entrance was faded but still legible. The House of 1,000 Faces. Inside, his flashlight flickered as he passed through the warped halls. The walls were lined with convex mirrors that distorted his form, long legs, bulging eyes, elongated arms. But as he moved deeper, he noticed something off. His reflection didn't always match his movements. Sometimes it lagged or moved just a hair too fast. Once, he saw his reflection grin before he did. He chalked it up to adrenaline and kept moving. The air inside was colder, and the laughter, piped through a hidden speaker system, crackled with static. He reached a long hallway lit by dying bulbs. The mirrors here were older, some cracked, but the images in them seemed sharper than the others. In one mirror, Trevor saw himself with someone standing directly behind him. He spun. No one was there. He turned back. In the mirror, the figure remained, a tall, lanky silhouette with bulging, inhuman eyes and a jaw that hung open far too wide. It wasn't a reflection. It was something in the mirror. Trevor stumbled backward, his boots scraping across the warped floorboards. His camera swung from his neck, and he instinctively raised it. Through the lens, the figure didn't appear. But when he lowered it, the thing was still there, closer now. It began to mimic him, tilting its head, cocking its fingers. Then it smiled. No, it stretched its mouth into a smile, the flesh tearing at the corners of its lips like rotting elastic. Terrified, Trevor ran deeper into the funhouse. The corridors bent in impossible directions, looping back on themselves. He smashed through a mirror that showed a dozen versions of himself, some crying, some laughing, and one completely still, eyes blackened out. Shards cut into his arms and legs, but he kept running. Finally, he found a door labeled Exit. He burst through it and found himself back in the entrance room. The mirrors were intact. The hallway he had just run through was nowhere to be seen. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He stepped back toward one of the mirrors, raising his flashlight to examine a smear on the glass. His reflection didn't hold a flashlight. Instead, it raised a camera. Trevor dropped the flashlight. His hands began to tremble. His reflection waved. It waved. Then, slowly, it turned around inside the mirror, walking away into the reflection of a hallway that didn't exist in the real world. Trevor sprinted to the exit again, but this time it wasn't a door, just a painted-on arch on the wall. Trapped, he hammered against the glass, shouted, screamed, but the mirrors only showed him an increasingly distorted version of himself. Until, finally, his reflection stopped matching him altogether. It moved independently, it smiled, it pressed its hand to the glass, and then it stepped out. Trevor fell to the floor. The thing stood above him, a perfect copy, but its skin was too smooth, its eyes too wide, and it blinked too slowly. It picked up Trevor's camera, slung it around its neck, and walked out of the funhouse into the morning sun. Later that day, hikers found an old amusement park deep in the woods. They called the authorities, curious about the building labeled Funhouse. But when police arrived, they found nothing inside except dust, cobwebs, and a single cracked mirror in the center of the room. Behind the glass, barely visible through the grime, was a man's face, screaming silently, beating the glass with bloody fists. Story 4, the ride that never stopped. When Shelby took the summer job cataloging condemned properties for the county records office, she expected long days of filing in the occasional dusty courthouse basement, not a field visit to an abandoned amusement park known as Crescent Falls. Her supervisor had handed her a manila folder with the name scrawled across the front in red marker, underlined twice. "Do not enter alone." "Just go take exterior photos," he warned. "We need updated images for the demolition contractors, but don't poke around. That place has a reputation." Shelby wasn't easily spooked. Raised by a mother who worked night shifts in an ER and a father who taught her how to change a tire before she could legally drive, she knew how to handle herself. So when she parked outside Crescent Falls at 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, armed with her phone and a clipboard, she didn't think much of the rusted gates or the yellowed grass reclaiming the lot. The park had been shut down for over 2 decades after a series of mechanical failures and rumors of disappearances. Lawsuits stacked high, owners vanished, and eventually, the whole place was fenced off and forgotten. Shelby wandered past the skeletal remains of the food stalls, the moldy cotton candy machines, and a lifeless merry-go-round where the horses had no eyes. Most of it looked like a set from a post-apocalyptic movie, frozen in time and warped by weather. But then she heard a whirring, faint at first, like a distant engine, then louder. She followed the sound, winding past collapsed kiosks and twisted metal fences until she came to a clearing, and there it was, the Whippoorwill. It'd been Crescent Falls' most iconic ride. A wooden track roller coaster designed in the 1940s, infamous for its sharp turns and steep, creaking climbs. Locals used to say it gave you a scream and a prayer before dropping you from 60 feet straight into a blind curve. And somehow, it was still running. The cart, a single, four-seater, glided along the track at a slow, deliberate pace, rising steadily up the first hill. The gears groaned under the weight, but they worked. No electricity had run through the park in 20 years, yet the Whippoorwill ticked along like it had never stopped. Shelby's first instinct was logical. Maybe a private company had begun testing the ride for refurbishment. Maybe this wasn't so abandoned after all. Then she looked closer. There was someone in the cart. A boy, maybe 12, dressed in clothes decades out of style, corduroy pants, a red jacket with a faded patch of a rocket ship on the sleeve. He sat perfectly still, hands on his lap, looking forward with an eerie calm. Shelby shouted, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The cart reached the peak and vanished down the other side with a loud rattle. She ran alongside the track, snapping photos for proof. The cart reappeared on a loop and began the climb again. Same boy, same blank stare. She pulled out her phone to call someone. Anyone, but there was no signal. Just static when she tried to connect. Curious and unnerved, she waited at the loading platform, a splintered stretch of wood warped from rain and time. The cart returned, slowed, stopped with a squeal of rusted brakes. The boy was gone. But in his place, on the seat where he had been, sat an old Polaroid photo. Shelby reached for it. Her fingers trembled. It was a picture of the same roller coaster, clearly taken years ago, judging by the sepia tone and frayed edges. 4 kids smiled in the shot, hands in the air mid-ride. The boy in the red jacket was seated in the front. On the back, in faded ink, June 14th, 1973, last ride before it broke down. Shelby's chest tightened. She looked around. No signs of life, just the soft creaking of the cart as it rolled off again without her. Then the temperature dropped. A cold wind passed through, and the sound of laughter, thin, hollow, echoed from somewhere high above the tracks. It didn't sound joyful. It sounded forced, repeated, like a recording that had been played too many times. She turned to leave, but the cart was coming back. This time, there were 2 passengers. A teenage girl, face pale and streaked with something dark, and an older man whose eyes were closed but whose mouth stretched into a wide grin. Neither moved. Shelby didn't wait. She ran. She didn't care about photos or job responsibilities or even her own curiosity. She made it halfway to her car before she realized something was wrong with the air. It was still. No birds, no insects, no breeze. Then she heard the sound of the roller coaster again. Right behind her, but there were no tracks on the road. The clatter of wheels, the mechanical groan of ascent. She turned slowly. The cart sat in the middle of the gravel path, unmanned, yet vibrating, as if just stopped. Sitting on the seat was another Polaroid. This one showed Shelby herself, standing in front of the ride platform, looking up at the boy in the red jacket. It hadn't been taken by her. She'd never seen that photo before. She left the park without looking back. The next day, Shelby returned with 2 sheriff's deputies and her supervisor. When they arrived, the roller coaster was silent, still, covered in vines and rust, no signs of recent movement. The wood was rotted through, physically impossible for any ride to have operated. They found no boy, no cart, no Polaroids, only Shelby's clipboard resting on the old ride platform, still warm to the touch, and far in the distance, just barely audible on the wind, the faint sound of screaming, circling in loops that never ended. Abandoned amusement parks may look like hollowed-out remnants of fun, but beneath the rust and silence, something darker often lingers. The laughter that once echoed through the air seems to hang on, warped and hollow, like it's waiting for someone to hear it again. Whether it's forgotten rides that won't stay still, shadows that move without light, or memories etched into empty grounds, these places remind us that joy can curdle into something else entirely. If you ever find yourself near a shuttered fairground, remember, some rides never truly stop. They just wait.